In an effort to further ensure the safety of Australians, New South Wales Police will use sophisticated facial recognition software on drones.
It's part of a plan to boost security and will allow police to scan crowds at major events and sporting stadiums. But is it an invasion of our privacy? Joining us for more is CEO and Chief Security Expert from Calamity, Lewkovitz. So, Daniel, I mean, this is an extension of a program that's already underway. What or who are police looking for?
Sure. Well, police are always looking for new tools, new technologies in an ongoing fight against crime. So there are many diverse applications for this, but once upon a time, if police wanted to conduct surveillance on a suspect, or perhaps they had to chase someone over fences or try to avoid a high-speed pursuit, which could be dangerous, they'd have to deploy air support, helicopters and so forth. But using drones means this capability can now be moved to the boot of a police car, for example, so it allows them a much faster response on short-term responses to crimes in progress.
Just like anyone who flies a drone, though, is this something that would have to be run through CASA so they know where they all are? Just looking at some pictures there of the drone looking like it was close to a plane, say, for instance.
Well, the interesting thing is, as a lot of people will have probably seen, drones now are a consumer product, and these things can be bought for under $1,000. And when you look at the capability of what almost a toy like this can do, you can only imagine the capability of government and law enforcement type tools as well, and what sort of facilities that would actually give them. Now, the problem with all of these things is fundamentally it's half a brick or more that's flying in the air, so there's always something underneath that, which is why people would be very nervous about flying drones, whether it's operated by civilians or law enforcement or government, over large crowds, because what happens when something goes wrong, mechanical failure, the thing falls, there's someone underneath it.
But also, I mean, if you're sitting in a crowd and all of a sudden there's a drone, I mean, how do you know that that's an official police drone and not some creep or,
well,
or an issue?
For the most part, you don't. Just like if you see a vehicle behind you that doesn't have lights and sirens on it, you don't know to whom that belongs. Now, there's almost an arms race happening now between anti-drone technology. We saw some of that in use at the Commonwealth Games and around sensitive sites versus the upswing in consumer technology. And so legitimate law enforcement or public service use has to fit in there somewhere between that minefield while maintaining public safety but also getting their operational objectives met.
There are cameras everywhere these days. Doesn't matter where you go, there's a camera watching. But is this, or can it be argued that this is an invasion of our privacy?
Well, fundamentally, a drone or an unmanned aerial vehicle, UAV, is really just a flying camera. So whether the camera's mounted on a pole or a wall or it's flying over the air.
But we're talking about cameras that have facial recognition technology
Absolutely.
attached.
So the follow-on question from that is what actually happens to that imagery? Now, what we are seeing a lot more of is governments and even private sector matching imagery that comes from cameras to a database of faces, so they can actually know who a person is and they can do this in real time. I've just returned from a trip to China, and one of the public displays there, which was just fascinating and terrifying at the same time, you'd walk past this bank of cameras, it would pick out every face in the video and it would immediately pull up photos of that person that it found on social media. And this is commercially available technology, so you can imagine what governments can do with it is far more advanced. And even this week, we're just reading about how the major political parties on both sides have been using technology to, in effect, spy on voters and consumers. So it is a very slippery slope, and the problem with privacy is that once it's gone, you don't get it back in a hurry. So I think we do need to be careful, and even though we'll always be told you don't have anything to worry about unless you're a criminal, it's worth remembering that while the government now may genuinely believe that, we don't know what the government is going to look like in the future. So we have to be careful about opening Pandora's boxes. Because
you have to be prepared for the worst case scenario, really, don't you?
Exactly. But at the same time, a lot of security principles and a lot of threats haven't changed in hundreds or thousands of years. So, you know, criminals 15, 20 years ago were doing really high-tech attacks, dirty nuclear bombs, hijacking planes, crashing them into buildings. Now they're going low-tech, crashing a car into a wall or using a knife in a stabbing attack. So as well as looking at high-tech crime and high-tech crime prevention, it's also important to remember low-tech skills, good security, effective risk management, police knowing how to shoot straight, the basics, as well as looking at all the sexy new toys.
Is this a form of surveillance that could stop what happened in Melbourne on Friday?
I don't believe that's possible. It could have certainly helped from a surveillance perspective, but we do know that after what happened in Melbourne, people had been under surveillance for a long time. The problem with cameras, whether they're flying or whether they're wall-mounted, is that they don't actually stop crime per se. They can't climb down off a wall and arrest someone. All they can do is sort of show what happened. What we will see a lot more of is these things being used at ad hoc events, sudden protests, pop-up one-off events where there may not necessarily be a permanent camera installation in place. Yeah, well, exactly. If you have a crowd that just appears out of nowhere on a beach or in a park or somewhere, and they don't have the infrastructure the way you might at, say, a stadium or a regular public place of entertainment, this is a good way of just throwing up surveillance in a hurry, and it does allow police or security to keep an eye on a much bigger area with a smaller deployment of manpower.
All right, so it's just pretty much just another tool for the police to use, or resource if they need it.
That's exactly right, but like any weapon, this can be used for good and it can be used for evil. It's just a question of who's actually behind the controls and what their agenda is.
All right.
Daniel, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Still to come.